Hey guys, Brendan Productions here. How are you all doing today? I should probably stop asking everybody how they're doing because how are they going to give me their answer? I don't know. Anyway, so it's been quite some time since I've made a video, and in my last video I actually asked what kind of games do you guys want to learn how to create in Java, and the most popular response was actually some sort of platformer game. So I thought, alright, that'll be easy. I'll just make a set of tutorials making a platformer game. But then I realized, I don't know how to make a platforming game, nor do I know how to make any game whatsoever. So I spent the past maybe month and a half or so of doing intensive schoolwork and trying to figure out how to make a platforming game in my free time. So here's the results. The level editor that was featured in my my last game has actually been turned into a full-fledged game. And I'm just going to show that to you right now. I'm sorry if it lags a little bit, but here we go. Okay, and just going to do this instead. Okay, so the game's called pi r squared, the area of a circle or a circle. So we're just going to press play, and it's a really basic game in which you are a circle and you just have to go through levels. Defeating enemies, avoiding sprites, getting checkpoints. Yeah. As you can see, the game is really simple, and this was actually used as my final project for my AP Computer Science class. But it also comes with a full-fledged level editor. The one that I showed off in the previous video was actually just a beta version, but now I've got the full-fledged level editor where you can place any sort of block and just pop it in there. So that was my take on a platformer game, and now I know how to actually work on a platformer game, and now through our set of tutorials we could sort of duplicate that game. So I guess we're going to go ahead and get started right now with this set of tutorials. So there's going to be several videos that are actually going to be explaining how to make a platformer game, but the first video is actually going to be a planning video, which is this video. So we're just going to sit here and plan how our platformer game is actually going to be designed, because planning means everything. Because if you have bad planning, you're pretty much going to end up having to scrap the whole thing once you actually begin. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to open up Notepad and get some planning going. We're doing very basic planning, but it's planning nonetheless. So the first thing we're going to have to design on our platformer game is actually the level editor, because the level editor will actually create the levels so we can actually play the game. So on the level editor, there are going to be several things taking place. The first thing we're going to need is a level editor class itself. And we're just going to make this an applet since we already know how to do those. And then there's also going to be several other classes. This level editor applet is actually going to have an array of objects. And this array of objects, which are stored in X and Y coordinates in the array, those are going to be our blocks. So just out of simplicity purposes, we're just going to have square blocks, and we're going to be able to place those wherever. Now, these square blocks are going to be 25 by 25 pixels, because that works out nicely. And they're just going to have simple images designed in Microsoft Paint. Alright, so now that we get to our, that's the basic idea that we're going to need for the level editor. We're also going to need the level editor to detect keystrokes, because we're going to use those keystrokes in order to switch what block we have selected, and then we're going to be able to click on the screen on the spot where we want to actually make the block. Okay, so now that we've got that, we can start working on the basic design of our blocks themselves. So we're going to have blocks in our hierarchical structure. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I don't know. But it's just we're going to do it in levels. So we're going to have a parent class called block, and this block parent class will hold all of the variables that are necessary to actually make a block. So we're going to have the x position of the block. We're going to have the y position of the block. We're going to have the image of the block. We are also going to have what else do we need for block? I think that's pretty much it for your basic block. So then we're going to have getters and setters for these various methods, or for those variables right here. You'll see what I mean in a second. What else are we going to need? We're going to need a couple of methods. The first method we're actually going to need is going to be the draw method, and that will actually take the image and draw it onto the screen, and this will take in some graphics. We're also going to have the method perform action, and this is going to perform it on the player. And so whenever a player lands on top of a certain block, if this block needs to do something to the player, it can. So for example, if there's spikes, then the player is going to have to die once they land on this little block. But yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the blocks for the level editor. At least I'm pretty sure. So that's very decent planning for what we've got so far. So what we're going to go ahead and do is actually set up this structure in Eclipse right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and start a new Java project here, and we're just going to call this tutorial game out of lack of creativity. Then we're going to find it. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to add, we're going to right click and add a new package. Now this package is going to hold everything that has to do with the level editor. There's also going to be another package for the game itself, but the level editor is where it's going to be. And then in the level editor, we're going to make a new class, and this is actually just going to be called the level editor. And it's going to be an applet. So we're just going to go in here and actually make it extend applet now. So what an applet is it's essentially a Java class that can use graphics. So we can actually draw into the applet. We can click into the applet. We can also display text into the applet. But more importantly, an applet can be run inside of a web browser. So hopefully at the end of this tutorial series, we can get it set up where our game actually can be run and accessed through a web browser. So we've got the level editor class, and now what we're going to do is we're actually going to make the block class. So we're just going to make a new class called block. And then we need to look at our planning over here, and we know that the block has a y, an x, an image, and getters and setters. So we're going to say int x, int y. Let's do some commenting as well. So these variables hold where the block is on the grid itself. So if you have a block that's located five spaces to the right and 5 spaces down, then you're going to have x, y. X is 5, y is 5. We also need the image block image. It's going to have us import image because we have not done that yet. And this image will actually be taken from a file and drawn onto the screen. So image to draw for this block. And finally, we're going to need getters and setters for all 3 of these. So what we can actually do to generate getters and setters, well, first of all, getters and setters are methods. I forgot to make these private. So what we've got here are a few private variables. And the reason they're private is because we do not want them being directly accessed from any other class, because that could cause some issues with 2 things accessing it at once. So what we're going to do is, since these are private and they can only be accessed by the block class, we're actually going to make public methods that that will allow other classes to actually get the values of these variables. So we're going to label this section getters/setters, And then we're going to do this trick little thing in Eclipse here, and we're going to go over to Source in the menu bar up at the top. Then we're going to press Generate Getters and Setters. So we do that, and then we're going to check all of our private variables, and then press OK. And as we can see here, it automatically generated our getters and setters. So we've got getX, setX, getY, setY, getBlockImage, and setBlockImage. So we can go ahead and just minimize all these because they're not important to us right now. So the next thing we are going to do is actually get our methods going. So we have two methods, draw and perform action. So the first method, draw, we're going to do a little commenting. This method will draw the block onto the screen, and then we're going to send in a parameter called G, and this is the graphics to draw with. So this is going to be public void draw, and we're going to have graphics G as a parameter. Okay, now this commenting style is actually kind of the standard, or it's not really the standard, but in my AP Computer Science class, every test and every official document commented their code with something like this. Above every method, we have a short description of what the method does and a description of what each parameter. So I'm just following in their style because it looks nice. So now in our draw method, we right now we really don't have to do anything. But just so we have a placeholder, I'm going to say G dot. No, wait. We're just going to leave that blank for now. We're also going to make the method public void perform action, and this is going to take in a player P. Okay. Now, so what we're going to end up doing is in our actual game, we're going to have each block perform an action on the player. So spikes kill the player if they land on it. A trampoline sends the player jumping up if they land on it. But the thing is, though, we do not yet have a player class constructed. So for now, I'm just going to delete this method, and we're going to add it in once we get our game actually going. So there's a few things you might notice about this class. First of all, we have 3 variables here, but they're never actually set. So what we need to do is generate a constructor for this this block class. So we're going to say we're going to make a little section for the constructors, and then we're going to make a public, or a default constructor. And if you remember, a constructor is what is called when you create a new instance of something. So in another class, if you say block B equals new block, that calls the constructor of the block class. So what we want to do when a new block is created is we just want to set these 3 private variables so they have values. So this is going to be the default constructor. So no values are actually provided by the user, but we're going to set default values. So let's just say the default value of x is 0, the default value of y is 0, and the default image is, let's just say, null, which essentially means it's nothing. And now we're going to have another constructor that takes in the position x, the position y, and the image. Actually, no. It's just going to have the position x and y. And so this is the constructor with full parameters. And it's going to say this dot x equal to x, this dot y equal to y. So what we're going to do is set this private x, which belongs to this, equal to x, which is the parameter of this method. The private variable y is going to be set to the y of this method. And then the last thing we need to do is actually create the image. So this is where our planning actually deceived us. One thing we forgot to do is actually create a method where we could actually get the image from the file system. So we're going to create that method now. So we're going to create a method called getImage that actually gets the image specified from the file system. So we're going to say public image getImage, and this is going to be string path. So essentially, we're creating a method that returns an image. It's going to get it from the file system and return it. Now, this has never been done in one of my tutorials before, actually getting images, so this is going to be a quick rundown. The first thing we need to do is actually create an image. So we're going to say image equal to null. So this is actually going to be the image that we are returning. So now, to avoid any errors in which the image might not exist, we are going to put this whole thing into a try block. And that will just prevent us from getting spammed if an image doesn't exist. If an image doesn't exist, it simply won't show up on the screen, which is no big deal. And then inside of our try block, we're actually going to do the code to get the image. So the first thing we need is actually a URL. So we're going to create a new URL called image URL. And this URL is just going to store the path of the image, essentially. So in order to actually generate this URL, we need to type in level editor, which is our main class that we're going to be using, our applet class. So we're going to do level editor dot class dot get resource, and then we need to type in the path name. Well, the path name is sent in via the parameter, so we're just going to do that. Now that we've got the URL, we can actually turn the URL into an image by saying image equals, now keep in mind image is our variable up here, image equals toolkit dot get default toolkit dot get image, and then we're just going to send in the URL, which is called image URL, and then there we go. Now it's going to want us to import URL, so we're going to import java.net.url, not javax.print.docflavor. Java.net is the one we need. And we have one more error here, but that's because we do not have a catch block on our try method. So we're just going to say catch exception E. So every time there's an error, it's going to jump to this piece of code, and we're just going to system.out.println the message of the error, so e.getMessage. So we'll know exactly what went wrong because it'll print it in the console. Okay, so now that we've actually got the image, we're just going to return the image, and we're good. So now what we're going to do is comment this method so we know exactly what it does if we open it up later. So this method returns the image of the block, and then the parameter path is the path of the image. Alright, awesome. So now the final thing we actually need to do for our constructor here is every time a new block is created, we're actually going to send in a let me think about how to do this. Nope, actually. So this is our full block class here. So we've got something to actually get the image, and our draw method is blank for now. So what we're going to do for our draw method is we're simply going to draw a rectangle. So we're just going to do quickly g.fillRect, and we're going to do the x position, which is this.x, y position, this.y, and the width and the height. Well, we're going to make every block 25 by 25. But the thing is, normally what you want to do is make it so this can easily be adjusted. So, what we're going to do is we're actually going, do we want every block to be 25 by 25? Yeah, okay, we'll do that. So we're just going to make the width and height both 25, because every block is going to be 25 by 25. Okay, and now for the final thing on this method is, since every block is 25, the x position, which may be 5 over, actually needs to be times 25. And same thing with the y position, because if we have this dot x, and x is going to be, let's say, 10, so it's the 10th block over to the right, we don't want to draw it at the pixel position 10. We want to draw it at the pixel position 250, if you know what I mean. Hopefully you do. So now that we've got our complete block class set up, we could finally finish up our level editor class. And This will be quick and simple. We just take it directly from the plan. So in our plan, we have an array of objects that will actually store all the blocks. So we're just going to say private object, and we're just going to say equals new object. And now we have to determine how many blocks there can be in a specific level. So we're just going to start things off by saying each level has 50 blocks. That may be a lot, but we're just going to do that. And this is a classic mistake. We forgot to give the variable a name, so we're just going to call this grid. So the grid is a double arrayed object, a square array consisting of an x length of 50 and a y length of 50 that will store our blocks. And we also, okay, so our blocks are going to be 25 by 25. We also need to set up our level editor so it's a key listener. Now, a key listener is the class that actually allows us to detect if a key is pressed on the keyboard. So we can simply make our class a key listener by saying implements key listener. And then it's going to have us import it and add unimplemented methods. So once we do that, we're going to get 3 methods that we don't want right now, but we could want them in the future. So now that this class is actually a key listener, we need to make sure that Java knows that we want this class to be its own key listener. We can do this in the initialization method, which in applets is called public void init. So every time an applet is created, this method init actually runs. So what we're going to say is we're going to add the key listener to the applet. So this, which is our applet.add key listener. Now it wants us to specify a key listener to add. Well, since our class is a key listener, we want to add our the class to its class's key listener. Yeah, it's really hard to explain how that works, but it just does. So now we've got our block set up, and we've got our level editor class actually set up. So now we're good to go to start programming the actual functionality. We've got the planning going, and the functionality is going to be all set soon. The first thing we need to do, though, is decide what we're going to do for our different blocks. So we could just figure this out now, since it's going to be the end of the tutorial. To start off, we're just going to have, let's just say, 3 basic blocks. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a sort of well, actually, the amount of blocks depends really on how we're going to design the game. There are basically 2 types of platformers. There's a platformer such as Mario and Kirby and those type of games where you go along and you defeat enemies and you can get power-ups. Like in Mario, you get bigger, or in Super Mario 3, you get the fox suit that makes you fly, and the original and all the others, you get the flower suit, which makes you shoot fire. So, do we want this game to actually have power-ups, or do we want it to be a game sort of like those like Super Meat Boy or VVVVVV, or along the line of Fez, where you are a guy that doesn't get any power-ups, but the world around you changes. So the world around you can get harder, but you remain the same. So our blocks actually rely on what kind of thing we want to do. I personally don't have a preference. We can do whatever you guys want to do. So please leave a comment. Discuss, well, you don't have to discuss, but please leave a comment saying what kind of platformer you would like to make. One with power-ups where you get stronger, or one where the levels around you just get harder. That would definitely make things easier on my part because I don't like to make life-changing decisions. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this this plan here. Gameplan.txt. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial and you guys learned something from it. We're definitely going to be continuing this game series until the game is actually finished. Then I'll upload it to the web and you guys can upload your own games to the web. It'll be a fun time. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. I definitely appreciate it. Please remember to rate, comment, subscribe, favorite, like, whatever else you want to do. If you want to dislike this video, go for it. Although I'll cry in my sleep every single night that you're alive. Okay, anyway, talk to you guys later. Have a fantastic day, and peace. And now here comes the hard part of finding. Oh, there it is. Okay.